Hey guys, my name is Ethan, this is Carberra. Welcome to the series where I teach you how to build a Discord pub up for your server. Today we were talking about a mute system, muting and unmuted members and stuff like that. This is a somewhat non-standard thing in Discord. There's no real way to do it in the actual GUI itself. However, bots generally take on this task. A lot of bots just add a mute role, but we're going to be doing a system that some of the more advanced bots do, where they actually take off other roles, provide the mute role so they are properly muted, and then when the mute ends on its own or is cancelled, their old roles are given back, and then they have access to talk on the server again. This is probably going to be quite a long video because there's kind of a lot of stuff to go through. I would be lying if I said this wasn't my first attempt at this, or I'd be lying if I said this was my first attempt, sorry. Because this thing has been a little difficult to get right, but I think I have it now. So we need to come over into our mod file, and we actually need to from .deb import db, because we're going to need to be doing stuff with the db. So if we then go into data db build.sql, we need to create a new table. And this new table will be used to persistently store on the mute data. About 95% of the time you won't need the data stored in here. This is just in case the bot gets shut off or loses connection or something like that. It just means that if a user is on a timed mute, that they can be unmuted when the time runs out, or after the time runs out if it happens to be that way. So we can create table if not exists mutes. It basically just means you don't have to manually do it. So you've got user ID, which can be an integer, a primary key, same as the other tables. You have your role IDs, which will be a serialized list of the role IDs the member had. And then you'll have end time, which will also be a text because it's a date time. You don't need to do a default with this because the end time is actually going to be optional, because they'll be able to be muted indefinitely. So if you come to our mod function again, or mod library again, we come down here, and then we actually make our mute command. So we need command name equals mute, and then we're not actually going to have alias. And then we need to check if the bot has permissions to manage roles. Oops. Because it needs to be able to move roles around. And then a server member should probably have manage roles, obviously, but they should also probably have manage server. I personally feel. You may not feel the same, but I feel as though they should have managed server as well. So I'm just putting that. The bot doesn't need it, but I feel like the member does, so we're putting that in there. An async def mutes members self CTX. We're using the same sort of thing as we did with our kick and ban commands above. So if you're unsure about what I'm doing, then go to that. However, we are going to be adding an extra argument, which is an amount of time. Now I'm going to do it in hours, because I'm building this for my server personally, and I can't see a situation where I would ever need to mute a member for less than an hour. And that way, if I need to mute a member for like a day, I could just put 24 in here. If I need to mute them for a week, I just put 168. I don't think I'd ever need to mute them for a week though. So we're going to have hours, and this is going to be an optional int. Now the reason we're not doing it as like a time string, like 5 days, 10 hours or whatever, is basically so the command interpreter doesn't get confused when we introduce our reason. Because that's of course going to be an optional string, and it's going to be no reason provided. Now so long as your reason doesn't start with a number, you'll be fine. But yeah, this just means that it takes the hours as the hours and everything is everything. For the purposes of testing this video today, we're actually going to treat the hours as seconds, just so I can show the bot unmuting, because I don't really want to wait an hour every single time. And we'll change it at the end. If I forget to change it in the end, it'll be updated in the repository to run as hours. I'll show you how to do it as hours, but we basically just need to pass it in as seconds right now, just so we don't screw anything up. So the first thing we need to do is we actually need to check if not len targets. So if we don't have any targets, then we need to send. Well, actually, I probably could have got a copy paste of all this here. So we just put this in there, same as usual. Boom. So if we do actually have some targets, the first thing we need to do is we need to create a list of unmutes, and it's going to be empty. Now this, because we're going to be doing, because the user will have the opportunity to mute multiple members, each member is going to be checked for permissions and stuff, and we want to make it as dynamic as possible, so we want to mute the members that can be muted and not mute the members that can't. And because of that, we actually need to have a list of the members that were actually muted and need to be unmuted. So that would be controlled by whether hours is a thing as well, but we'll get to that when we come to it. So then we need to iterate through our targets list for every single target. And we need to check if they actually have the mute role at all. Target.roles. Now we are actually going to define this mute role down here as self.mute role equals self.bot.guild.getRole, and we're just going to come in here and disable stream mode because we never need it on. We're going to go into our server settings, roles, muted, and we're going to right click copy ID, and we're going to put that in there. So now we have our mute role that will be given to the member when they're actually muted. Of course you'll need to set the permissions up and everything, but we're not going to talk about that in this. We're just going to talk about the actual thing. Ideally you would want like either severely restricted access or read-only access to stuff. But yeah, so next thing we need to do is we actually need to check if we if they can be muted. So if ctx.guild.me.toprole.position is greater than target.toprole.position. So what that's doing is checking to make sure that we can actually mute the member. I think we might have done it in the kick. Yeah, we did do it in the kick. But yeah, for those of you that weren't there for that, I'll quickly explain this. So basically, I have a higher role than S4 does because I have the Carberra role and S4 has the Carberra bot. So if S4 had this ability, for example, it wouldn't be able to mute me, it wouldn't be able to mute tutorial bot, but it would be able to mute most other members of the server. So that's what I mean by that. So its top role, it doesn't have to be the Carberra bot, its top role can be like the S4 role, for example, is way higher than the Carberra bot one, so it would work with this role instead, but it displays the Carberra bot because that's how I like it in the server. But yeah, that's basically how that works. So essentially what that line is saying is if that member's roles can be manipulated, because if the member is higher, if the target is higher than the bot, then their roles cannot be changed. So if that was all true, then we need to actually start muting the member. So we need to get a series of role IDs that we can do by joining a string r.id for r in target.roles. It's the join syntax is so crap, but you don't really have an option. And then we need to set an end time. So end time equals datetime.utc now plus time delta seconds equals, and again I'm just going to put hours. You would realistically put hours times by 3600 in this. If you wanted it in minutes, you do it times by 60. Again, we're just going to do seconds equals hours for now because I want to show this off. But yeah, and we're only going to set that if hours is a thing, else we're just going to set that to none and deal with it later. So next we actually need to add this mute entry to the database. So we could do db.execute insert, not intert, into mutes. So if they're not in there already, then it'll be fine. If they are in there already, then it will I actually try to indicate it on my screen as though you can see that this will have triggered, so this is safe to do, unless of course you mess it up like I have done plenty of times in previous recording attempts of this. And then we need target dot id role IDs, and then we do this is a botch, and I am inevitably going to get some complaints over this, but it does work, and it's the cleanest way I can think of doing it. So we need our end time. So if you go back into our, we need this essentially, and we need this as an ISO format. Now our end time has an attribute called ISO format, and that will do exactly what we want it to do. And it will convert it into a string that we can put in a database perfectly fine. It's a little different to the standard that SQLite or SQLite uses, but that doesn't actually matter, because the from ISO format will deal with either format. So it's all technically accounted for. It's a bit weird, but it is accounted for. However, of course, if our end time is none, then it's not going to have an ISO format. So we need to set a value. Or we need to set a value to give to this variable if it doesn't exist. So we can do that. We can actually just set that as none. However, of course, ISO format is a function, so we need to call it, but none isn't callable. So what do we do about that? This is where lambda comes in, and we can just do lambda : space none, and that will create it will essentially create a function of none. Don't ask me how that works. Lambda is broken, but it is incredibly useful once you know what to do with it. Like we were using it in the server information and the user information stuff. Well, I think it was just the server information actually. We were using it as it was intended to be used in that video. We are not using it as it was intended to be used here. But that does genuinely work. If that runs, if it doesn't have an ISO format, it will run a function that will simply return none, which is hilarious. I love it. I love it. And so many people are going to hate on me for it, but it works, so shut up. As I say, if it looks stupid but it works, it works. It's not stupid. So now we can await target.edit roles equals self.mute role. And that will replace all the target's roles with the mute role. Of course, we already have them stored at this point, so we can do that now. And now we need to actually log this. So I'm just going to take this log from a previous attempt at this. This is just easier. So it's more or less the same as the kicks ones we had up here. So we have the same color. We have a member muted. We have the thumbnail. The only real difference is this line here. Everything else is pretty much the same. Obviously we just got rid of the AKs in member because we don't need them for this. But the duration here. So we have hours. It will say hours. If hours, else indefinite. And then we don't want that in line. So basically, what that will it will output a duration if there is one. If none was specified and they need to be unmuted by a command, then it will just say indefinite, and that's the only real difference. And it will send that to log channel as well. And now we need to set the unmute. So if they were successfully muted and nothing went wrong, and we need to check if hours is a thing, and if it is, we need to do unmutes.append target. And now we need to do other validations. So the else, that's right. So the else for this should simply be something like, I'm just going to do some more copy pasting because I'm lazy like that. Oh god, what? Oh, okay. Okay, Sublime. There. Cool. So target display name cannot be muted. Essentially, that just means that the roles are too high. Then you've got else. I'll just write this out by hand, so I know where we are. ctx.send. Well, not by hand, but you know what I mean. Target.display name is already muted. And then else. I don't think there are any other else's. I think if that worked, then it's simply it simply finished all its stuff. So we could just do, I'm just making sure the indents are correct. Await ctx.send action complete, the same as the other ones, just being consistent. But we're still not done because we actually need to unmute them. So we can do if len unmutes, and seeing as the bot will probably stay on for this, we can actually just use the asyncio sleep, which is something we didn't use last series and I never really do use at all. So from asyncio import sleep, because I normally use scheduled stuff, but there really isn't a point because we're only waiting for one thread, because all the members that are going to be muted in this fashion are going to be muted for the same amount of time. So we can do await sleep hours, and then after that is done, we need to do await self.unmute, which we will create ctx, and then we need to send in. We'll just send in the list. Screw it. We don't need to do any fancy arg parsing, as much as I would like to, because I do like that syntax. We don't need to do it. So yeah, now we need to do the unmute systems. We actually need to set a check failure thing, don't we? Mute members error, and then that's all we need to do for that. Okay, so now we need to do our mute system. So we can just do a function for that for now, and we can pass it, and then we can have a command that will essentially call that function. So we do command equals unmute. We need to take these same permissions again. So we're just going to rip them straight from, like that. And then we're simply going to take the exact same arguments again from mute, except we're not going to have the hours, obviously. So async def unmute members, because they need to be a different name. And then passing the same ones, and then it's the hours we need to get rid of, not the reason. Oops. Cool. That's still really damn long, but I don't really care. So actually, do we always put reason on second line? We don't. Okay, fair enough. We'll just leave it on one line then. It's not technically past 120 characters, is it? I can't shift scroll, so I can't check. Oh well. So if not len targets await ctx.send, one or more required arguments is missing, else simply await self.unmute ctx targets reason equals reason. So essentially this will be the function that unmutes members, whether it's automatically called here or manually called using this command. It's basically just a little command wrapper for this function, really. We do actually want a few more arguments on that. Well, we don't want a few more arguments, we want one specifically, which is our reason, which is going to equal mute time expired. There we go. And we want to, I'm going to force that to be a keyword argument, but you of course don't have to do that. Okay, so to unmute we need to do a few checks. We don't need to do a check before we start iterating through the targets, so we can do for target in targets. If self.mute role in target.roles. This basically means that if a member gets manually unmuted, if they're set to be automatically unmuted, this just won't error. We don't need to do an else case on that. We could just need to check. Oh, something's wrong. I'll put an is instead of an if. We just need to check if they actually need to be unmuted, basically is what they're doing. So we get the role IDs back from the other side using db.field, select role IDs from mutes where should be user ID equals that, and then target.id. Cool. And then we need to get our roles, which can be a little bit of list comprehension. ctx.guild.getRole int. We need to convert it to an int on the other side as well. id for id in roles dot role ids dot split to deserialize the list. If len id to make sure it's not an empty string, just in case the member didn't have any roles to remove. And then we need to go into the database and then delete that entry because we no longer need it. Delete from mutes where user id equals that, and then target.id. And then we await targets .edit roles equals roles. We actually give them their roles back, and then we give them the fat log, or we give our log channel the fat log anyway. So it's the same sort of thing as before, just member unmuted. We just have member and reason this time. So for reason for the unbound, or the unmute, sorry. The default reason, as you can see, is mute time expired, and then everything else is fine. So that should now work. The only thing we haven't sorted out is unmuting members when the bot launches. However, we just want to make sure that everything actually works first. This should work because this, at least this part of the code, it's not managed guild every single bloody time. This should work because it wasn't this part of the thing I was having too many issues with last time. So this should actually work fine. I do need to quickly go and set my test account properly. Give me a second. Okay, so I just needed to give my test account the roles it had. So announcements and videos, which is the roles that people would normally have in the server, and also tutorial helper, so it appears in this section here. When we mute our test account, it should disappear from here. And if I type, say, plus mute exo for app 10 testing, it should reappear after 10 seconds. So fingers crossed. Something went wrong. God damn it. Unique good straight failed. Something is left in the database from the last time I tried to do this. Give me a second. Yeah, I'll be the first to admit that sometimes these videos do go wrong. And that was an artifact of that from before. But this should work now. 10 testing. Boom. There we go. Our account has gone from here. It's logged it so we can see the role updates have also happened, as you can see here. Those are muted, so member action by Carberra. Something's gone wrong, isn't it? Yep, I have messed something up. Because I didn't give the reason. Actually, god damn it. Duration 10 hours, obviously it was 10 seconds, but there you go. Reason testing. So the log worked, but the actual unmute didn't. I believe it's simply because I just passed the wrong number of arguments through. It shouldn't actually need that though, should it really? Where is the actual unmute? Reason. Oh, targets. I passed the wrong thing through, I think. Okay, so the issue was a really simple one. I forgot to pass self into unmute. That was a really rookie mistake. I also noticed that this mute members error thing was actually indented one too far over, so I just unindented that. So this should now work properly. At least there wasn't any massive mistakes this time, it was just stupid ones. So the bot's been muted, or not the bot, the account's been muted as you can see. We're just waiting for confirmation it gets unmuted. There it is. Our account is back. It has been unmuted after 5 seconds. Member unmuted, member except for app, reason mute time expired. If we were to now mute our test account for a little bit longer, let's say 3600 seconds, which in this case would be an hour. But obviously it wouldn't be 3,600 hours because I believe that is like half a year or something. I think a year is about 8,000 hours. I think it's 8,960 or something. You know what, we can actually work it out. 24 times 365, 8,760. Okay, fair enough. I don't remember that off the top of my head, I just did the calculation really recently. But we can actually go and unmute them, so we are actually going to need the ID. Mute that for I have testing again, and it is already muted. Oh, I tried to mute him again. So that system works. That's good. Testing again, and then we have a manual unmute. That won't stop the program from waiting. It'll just mean that when the sleep timer runs out, it won't error. It won't bother doing anything because we have this check here. So it checks if they actually still have the role. If they're then muted again, that could be potentially problematic. But theoretically, that shouldn't really happen. That's a very specific use case. Yeah, and ultimately, if you wanted a more advanced system, you could probably construct one. If you like the video, then say hello down below. If you have any questions, then feel free to leave them down below as well. Or you can join the Discord server using the link in the description. If you really like the video, then consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you don't miss out on future uploads. And if you really, really like the video, then consider supporting me on Patreon. Of course, you don't have to, but it would be a really cool thing of you to do. Next time, in episode 22 of this series, we are going to be creating a report system. So we're going to be creating a system to report other members to the moderators. So that should be kind of cool. So I'll see you then.